Good morning. How's everybody doing? I'm going to speak on gratitude, um, unusual and humble. But first, aren't we grateful for DVR today? Yeah, I was really grateful when God invented that. Um, well, do you think that maybe you could be more grateful in your life? Anybody besides me? Yeah. So it's a spiritual lesson for us to continue to learn. So let's talk about gratitude, unusual and humble. First of all, let me tell you that when I worked part-time at a Japanese American church in California, which I mentioned one time previously, I was in contact with a guy named Tony Yuba who would drop off his kids at our church, but he would never come and his wife would never come to church. Their three children were very close in age, and so they were all in the same class, taught by my wife. So she had a connection there with them, and I had a connection with the father and the husband, Tony, because we played tennis together. So as Bev and I prayed and conferred together, we felt like God was really moving on their hearts. So some things began to happen. Number one, the three kids in Bev's class asked an important question. They said, if they could go to heaven if their parents went to hell. Something was happening. This family had a Buddhist background and little Christian exposure, so this was all new to them. And then as I played tennis with Tony, who was very passionate in everything he did, he asked me, well, why don't you swear when you play tennis? I mean, come on, live up to the norm here. And I should have said this, but I didn't. Well, you don't have to swear if you don't make mistakes. That would have been a beauty, right? But I missed it, so... At any rate, then Tony and his wife, Yoshika, began to attend the Bible study I was teaching. And they had many questions. And Tony was, Tony's questions would be blah, 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 expletives. Paul said that, blah, blah, blah. And then he was really paying attention, but he was so passionate that he was kind of shook up the group a little bit with his language, but he was really going after it, trying to find out what was truth. So eventually they invited us over for dinner, Tony and Yo. And we went over there in South Pasadena to eat with them. And Tony pulled me aside and he said, Yo and I have been talking, and we realized what a great marriage we have. We have three beautiful, healthy children. I have a great job down in downtown LA. We have this lovely home in South Pasadena. We have a new car in the driveway. And we looked at each other and we said, who do we thank for all this? Who do we thank? God's grace was really drawing the Yuba family. And that night, Tony and Yo and their three kids not only gave thanks to God, but they gave their lives to God. You see, gratitude can be life-changing. Life-changing. It changes the view through which you look at the world, at your family, at your circumstances. Gratitude is life-changing. G.K. Chesterton once said, the critical thing is whether you take life for granted or you take life with gratitude. From our passage in Luke chapter 17 today, Jesus traveled to Jerusalem and came upon a village. He met up with 10 lepers who were probably on the outskirts of the village. Normally, they would be quarantined to their village because leprosy was a highly contagious disease. And the Old Testament required lepers to stay in their leper colonies. According to Leviticus 13, it says the person with such an infectious disease must cry out, unclean, unclean. He must live alone. He must live outside the camp. So the lepers had to identify themselves as defiled or unclean when anyone came in proximity to them. And they lived in this world that was unimaginable in terms of poverty, their dependence on any kind of charity, and the slowly destruction of their bodies through this progressive disease. And so it was shameful to be a leper, both emotionally and socially. Now we notice that the 10 kept the law when they encountered Jesus, and they stayed at a distance, and then they cried out, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. They desperately wanted healing. They wanted out of this shameful context in which they lived. Leviticus 14 says that the priest acted as a health inspector to verify whether a cure had taken place in someone who had been ill. And so Jesus just said to the 10 lepers that he met, go to the priest. When they cried out for mercy, he said, just go to the priest. Now, this was a big test of faith because normally Jesus would speak to a leper, be clean, as he did in Mark chapter 1, and or he would lay his hands on them and pray for them. Jesus broke the law to meet people's needs. He loved so much, and he loved the lepers, the poor. And so this was a great test of faith that he was putting them in. And as they went and obeyed Jesus, they were healed. And one of those came back to Jesus to give thanks. They responded with faith. All 10 were healed, but only one returned to give thanks. And from this, we can learn two major lessons today about gratitude. First of all, gratitude is unusual. When the one man came back who was healed, Jesus said, were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? 90% were ungrateful. 10% were grateful. It's not really natural to express appreciation, even sometimes when God does something very significant for us, maybe even miraculous for us, as we bask in the provision and forget the provider. Let's consider it in an economical way. Let's say you're married, you have 2 children, and you make $50,000 a year total household income. That puts you in the top 10% of wealthy families in the global population. Do we give thanks for $50,000 a year for our family? What I often hear is that people are wanting more. And it's okay to seek God's blessing, but they're grasping for more. They're motivated by the more. They're influenced by the more, not necessarily what is God doing? What does God want for my life? How about this? In Missouri, if you're in the top percent of wealth, if your household income is $77,000 a year. I have a feeling that we have a lot of wealthy people in our church. Is our gratitude appropriate for the abundant wealth that we have. It's amazing how God has blessed us. The Pilgrims took this very seriously, of course, and that's where we get Thanksgiving. But every year, they would do an object lesson with their children. And they would place 5 kernels of corn on a plate in front of each child as a reminder of what they had to eat when they were initially in Plymouth Colony. Teaching them to be grateful for the small things. Now, the Bible talks a lot about gratitude. I love the verse in Hebrews 12:28, which says, "Since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful. And so worship God acceptably." Did you know that there is acceptable worship and unacceptable worship? Acceptable worship is worship with gratitude. Here when we sing songs together, but throughout your week to week life, to be grateful. Let us be thankful. The word thankful in the Greek New Testament is charis. Can we all say charis? Charis. It means grace. Grace. Literally translated, the phrase "let us be thankful" would read, "let us have grace." So if we are thankful like the one leper, we will live in an attitude of grace. And that leper who came back to Jesus, he saw his healing as a gift of grace. He didn't take it for granted. He took it with gratitude. We are grateful when we know what we have is ultimately from above. When we think it's come because of our ingenuity or our business sense or our work ethic or our whatever, and a lot of those things can be good, but ultimately all good things are from above. And when we see that, when we have that perspective, we see life through a whole different lens. I love the story in John chapter 3 where John and Jesus were baptizing in proximity to one another. And John's disciples came to John and they said, "John, we got a problem. Did you know Jesus is over there baptizing? Jesus is over there baptizing. And John, this is serious. He's baptizing more people than you." What were they trying to do? They're trying to stir up an issue, jealousy, whatever, trying to take sides. And to this, John replied, "A man can receive only what is given him from heaven." Do you see it? A man can receive only what is given him from heaven. Instead of jealousy, John was grateful for the part that he played in the kingdom of God. He didn't care if Jesus was baptizing 100 and he was baptizing 2, because he knew all good things come from above. A man can receive only what is given him from heaven. And so John lived life as a gift, not a fight. There are a lot of people in our world, maybe ourselves sometimes, that we're fighting for that more, for that extra, for that addition. Live life like John the Baptist. Live life as a gift, not a fight. You're going to see your joy skyrocket. I think that's something that Bev and I have really noticed in her ministry in Haiti. And when we've had contact with Haitians here in the United States, and we've had them in their home, and we've talked about how they are more grateful than we are. And they have little or nothing or next to nothing. And they are more grateful than we who have pretty much everything. And you know what? They're much more joyful. Because they have taken the perspective that what they receive is ultimately from above. So they're not fighting for this, that, or the other thing. They're resting in the grace of God, and they are thankful. Now, Jesus modeled his whole life was a life of gratitude. Remember when the 5,000 were following him, and when it says 5,000, it says 5,000 men. So there could have been 20,000 or possibly 30,000. And they were following him around this one day, and they ended up in the countryside in the late afternoon, and they were hungry, and you might know the story, but the food available was only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Jesus accepted the limited resources, and then it happened. No, not the multiplication of the food. The miracle of a grateful heart. Sometimes this verse gets skipped over. Luke 9:16, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, Jesus looked up to heaven and gave thanks. It was only after the miracle of a grateful heart came the miracle of the multiplication of food. I'm sure the crowd was so excited to see the food multiplying in front of them. But how much more God was rejoicing as he looked down on his son, grateful and dependent upon him. You see, Jesus didn't complain about his limited resources. And as Bev and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, Jesus was poor. He didn't have a job to make money. He depended on his companions to take care of him. And he didn't complain about the little that he had. Rather, he thanked God for what he did have. Maybe we took that energy out of what we could get and put it into what we have gotten, we'd be a lot happier people. Well, the second lesson I think that's really profound in this passage is that gratitude is humble. Gratitude is unusual, and gratitude is humble. Consider the story of Ezra in the Old Testament. In Ezra chapter 3, it says, when the builders laid the foundation of the temple of the Lord, the priests and Levites took their place to praise the Lord. And with praise and thanksgiving, they sang to the Lord. He is good. His love endures forever. And all the people gave a great shout of praise to the Lord because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. Now, historically, we know that Cyrus, king of Persia, had freed the Israelites from Babylonian captivity. And so they were brought back to Jerusalem, and they began to rebuild the temple that was destroyed. And upon finishing the foundation, the worship team went crazy praising God. And the people started shouting joyfully, and there was loud, boisterous, ear-splitting gratitude. And you might think that the people within proximity who could hear this were thinking, wow, they finished the whole temple. in just this short period of time. But no, the Israelites were displaying humble gratitude by this wild, boisterous worship just for the foundation. No walls, no roof, no doors, just a foundation. You see, sometimes we hold back our gratitude until our concern is past, our need is met, our situation resolved, our task is finished. But here we have a totally different picture of what gratitude really is. Giving thanks is humble. It's an attitude. It's not a destination. It's a lifestyle. It's not a conclusion. It's a process, not a finish line. So I want to encourage you to be thankful for the incomplete. Be thankful as you're waiting for closure. Be thankful for the little things, for the small beginnings. Be thankful for just the foundation. Now back to our text, we see that the man who returned to Jesus and gave thanks threw himself at Jesus' feet in worship. And he was a Samaritan, who according to Jewish law was to be in no association with a Jew. But the pride that segregated the Jews and the Samaritans, at least here, was broken down by the Samaritan's humble gratitude. Gratitude is life-changing. Did you know that there are still leper colonies in the world? There is a cure for leprosy. I forget the doctor's name who's famous for that. But there are some remote areas still where there are leper colonies. And I was reading some time ago about Pastor Jack Hinton from New Bern, North Carolina, who took a missions trip with some people from his church to a leper colony. And there they held a worship service, and he was leading the worship. And he came to close to the end, and he thought, I'm just going to ask somebody if they have a request. So he put that out there and said, does anyone have a request for our closing song? And a woman who had been facing away from him turned around, and this is what he said. It was the most hideous face I've ever seen. Her nose was gone. Her lips were gone. Her ears were gone. And then she lifted a fingerless hand in the air and said, can we sing Count Your Many Blessings? Wow. I want a humble heart like that. How about you? I realize I'm not there. In my years growing up, I was not very expressive of gratitude. You might remember from a few months back, I shared about how I used to steal when I was a kid. You know, when you're a kleptomaniac, you're not really a grateful person. Just a side thought there. And I didn't really have great role models. I was totally engrossed in athletics. All we did was play baseball, basketball, and football. And without good role models in terms of gratitude in that arena, I just really gave way to pride. And I wonder if that's why my pride in athletics is the reason why I'm so impressed with professional athletes when they show their gratitude. Because from my standpoint, and I may be wrong, but it seems like there's a small percentage in our entitlement culture in the professional sports arena who are really thankful and grateful for what they have and believe that it came from God. Not from their great athleticism or their great sports mind, maybe their coach or whoever. But it didn't come fully from the horizontal. It came ultimately in the vertical. And so I'm so inspired to be of humble gratitude when I hear someone talk about how God has blessed them and they are grateful for what they have and the situation that they're in. And one that has really stood out is the story of Mariano Rivera, the greatest relief pitcher in the history of baseball. Anybody know of Mariano Rivera? Okay, we got baseball over here. Jen, do you know Mariano Rivera? Okay, I knew you would. She loves baseball. She told me that yesterday. So Mariano Rivera was literally the greatest relief pitcher in history. And in 2013, he retired, and he decided that, like some of these people retire and they go around and they come out on the field and they get, glory after glory, which is okay. But Mariano Rivera decided to do it differently. He decided to every stadium that his team went in the American League his last year, he was going to go behind the scenes and meet with the ticket salesman, the ushers, and all those, the custodians that were behind the scene. And he took time to chat with them. He took time to sign autographs, pose, for pictures and everything. And he said this, I appreciate what you guys do. This was when they were in Cleveland. He said, I appreciate what you guys do. And I'm really thankful. And thank you for being here. Thank you for taking some time to be with me today. What a humble, grateful heart. Mariano Rivera is a devoted Christian. Well, to close, how can we grow in gratitude? Well, number one, and it may seem oversimplified, but it's express gratitude in your home. And I'm not talking about just something, significant that your spouse or child or someone does, but I'm talking about everything, little things. Someone bringing you something or passing something to you from the couch to the chair, everything. Express gratitude in your home. Dr. Froh from Hofstra University is a specialist in the area of the art of thankfulness. And he did a study especially relevant to children, and this is what his conclusion was. Grateful kids are happier and more satisfied with their lives. That's worth investing in. Your gratitude in your home, you're more like Jesus. And as your kids and others in your home see you more like Jesus, they emulate you and they become more like Jesus. So it's a win-win. And Dr. Froh went on to develop a 5-fold model of gratitude. And his first step was model gratitude in your home. Second is eliminate negativity in your heart. Because that negativity really gets in the way of gratitude. And let me share a couple of personal things that I've gone through. One was I used to be very much into the cultural norm of saying things like, when someone say, well, how are you doing? Oh, I'm really stressed out. There came a time, I don't know, I think I was in my 40s, and I realized every time I said that, I was living life as a fight, not a gift. And stress was winning in my heart. My words reflected my heart. Stress was beating me. It was robbing me of joy. It was robbing me of seeing life really as a Christian. And so I just completely eliminated that phrase from my vocabulary. I cannot sincerely remember the last time I ever said, I'm really stressed out, except for just a second ago. One other thing. People, these are subtle things, but they really do affect us. You know how people say, oh, someone's telling them something, oh, that's terrible. And then somebody else, in a conversation later that week, oh, that's horrible. Or that's awful. What are we saying when we say those things? They're usually about very mundane situations. If someone spills a Dr. Pepper or a cherry limeade, I can feel a cherry limeade right now. I'm getting dry up here. On your carpet, it's not terrible. I know, we had one in the other service that was rebellious. No, just kidding. It's not terrible. It's unfortunate that you have to clean it up and get the carpet cleaner and all of that. But it's not bad. It's not that bad. And it's not that bad if I go to a game and my grandson strikes out all 3 times he gets up the bat. Actually, he hit the ball the other day. He didn't know what to do. He stood there, 6 years old. The crowd roared, "Run!" And he ran to first, and he was safe. Oh, boy. So missing the bus isn't awful. There's a lot of things that we say that we give this negative, at least a connotation to those actions or events in our daily life. Let me tell you what terrible is. Terrible is an airplane crash. Terrible is when a child dies. Terrible is when you watch a loved one year after year after year suffer from a chronic illness. We need to reserve the right words for the right situations. And I will not say it's terrible, horrible, or awful because I don't want that negativity breeding in me when it's not. And I'll reserve terrible for something that's really drastic. See, Jesus looked up to heaven and he gave thanks when things weren't going his way, even when he just had 5 loaves and 2 fish for maybe 30,000 people. We need to stop looking down and look up like Jesus did and give thanks, and we'll experience joy that we've never known before. Lastly, negativity is oftentimes, just complaining about something that happened to us. And so I think we can learn a lot about gratitude by this little story that I read about Matthew Henry, a famous Bible commentator. He was assaulted on the street and robbed. He went home and he took out his diary. And this is what he wrote. Let me be thankful. First, because I was never robbed before. Second, although they took my wallet, they didn't take my life. Third, although they took my all, it wasn't much. And fourth, because it was I who was robbed, not I who robbed. Matthew Henry eliminated negativity from his heart. And so he was grateful. He gave thanks in all circumstances. 1 Thessalonians 5:18. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God for you in Christ Jesus. This is the will of God for you. It's the will of God for me. Give thanks in all circumstances. God is at work. God is behind everything for us. He's not letting us down. He is our helper. He is our comforter. He will never leave us or forsake us. So we can give thanks in all circumstances. Let's pray. Father, you are so good. We sing about your goodness. Lord, I pray that your goodness would be reflected in our words day in, day out. That we know that everything that we have in life is ultimately from above, that it's gift after gift after gift from you. We praise you. Thank you for this time together today. In Jesus' name, amen.